This movie was interesting. I say that because I'm not fully sure if I've formed a cohesive opinion of Blade Runner 2049 yet. So, in a way, this review is going to be an exploration of my thoughts, and perhaps I'll come to some sort of proper conclusion at the end. I guess there's only one way to find out. So, a few spoiler-free thoughts. First, I will warn you when spoilers come up because there is a lot to discuss, and I don't want to have to restrict myself to watching the wording. So, a few important things first, though. I do enjoy this movie. It is good. There's a lot to love from the set design, cinematography, directing, the score, the acting, and all that is very technically well made. The main bit that's sort of making me conflicted is the way that the story plays out over the course of the film. I'm not really going to give too many details on that. I'll save that for the spoiler section. But, again, without going into it, I felt that the film was going to be building to some ideas, and it never really went there. It just sort of stopped. And as a fan of the first Blade Runner, one of my favorite elements to that film is all of the philosophical themes, the way that builds throughout the course of the film. And I feel that Blade Runner 2049 on first glance was a little empty of elements like that. But the more I think about it, the more I am starting to notice things like that. So take that for granted. Perhaps when I see it a second time, I'll enjoy it more. I don't think I really liked the first Blade Runner that much when I saw it, because I didn't really know what to expect, and it wasn't only until like 4 times later that I actually sort of got it. So that's sort of the main thing right there. Other spoiler-free thoughts I can say, like, I am glad I saw it. This movie didn't need to exist, but with what we got, I am happy. And, I would recommend it if you're a fan of the first Blade Runner, but probably not if you aren't a fan, or if the first Blade Runner didn't really do it for you. Because this is very stylistically similar. It's very slow-paced, a lot of investigative detective work, a lot of zoom and enhance cliches, and there are action moments to it, but they're very short and spread out. That's not really the highlight. That's not what you're there for. You're there for the story and the world. And the world is very great. I do like that we get to see a lot more of the Blade Runner universe. And, there's a lot more than just the downtown area of Los Angeles shown. And there was a nice visual contrast between all these different areas, so that was really great. I like the way they expanded upon ideas and story moments from the first Blade Runner. Again, without spoiling anything, I'll just say that I liked that they did not provide definitive answers for a lot of the big questions from the first Blade Runner. It is sort of a tendency with sequels to just simply go explaining everything and just telling you that this is the way it is, this is what's going on. So I liked that this didn't do that. There is enough information where you could still be a little on the fence about making an absolute conclusion. This gives you proof and ideas for that, but this gives you proof and ideas for that. So I think that was definitely a strength for it. But for me, it was just simply that the third act of the film was a little messy on first glance and sort of going over it in my mind. But I have been thinking about some ideas that might sort of change my view on that, so who knows, maybe I'll do a 180 mid-review. There's only one way to find out, and that is in the spoiler section, which is going to be starting now. Again, this is your final warning. I do recommend you go and see this movie, but there is a lot to break down and discuss. Are you gone yet? Okay, spoiler time. So, story-wise, there are a lot of important beats and moments that, while they may occur early in the film, they weren't revealed in any trailers or marketing, so I count that as a spoiler. And the first big thing is that Ryan Gosling's character, Kay, is a replicant. He's a Blade Runner replicant, and he hunts other replicants, and the opening scene is him doing that. He retires Sapper Morton, played by Dave Bautista. I did like Dave Bautista's character. It's just a little too bad that he was only in the movie for a brief little bit. I wish they could have done a little more with him. They did with one of the little short films that was released online. It was a nice little piece. But other than that, he basically is there to die, because his death and where he died sort of sets up the main events of the story. That is that Kay finds this buried box which has the remains of a person who they realize died from childbirth, but also it was a replicant. And so, this raises all kinds of implications, like replicants can reproduce. How is this possible? So, Kay goes on a quest sort of to find this child, and slowly he starts piecing together that maybe he is the child grown up, because he has memories of these places he hasn't been to that he thought were implants, but maybe they're real. And there's these pages missing from the book about the records, which means someone's trying to cover the tracks and hide the truth, so he doesn't exactly know. So this makes up the first 2/3 of the movie, and then eventually sort of culminating in him going to Las Vegas to find Deckard, who has been hiding out there. And so for this stretch of the film, I really liked everything that was going on. It was very slow, but it was a very nice build-up. Again, I really liked being able to see this world and the visuals to it and sort of take this all in. And I liked the characters and their interactions with each other. Probably my favorite character in the movie is he has this like artificial sort of hologram type girlfriend, I guess, and her name is Joy. There's a lot of advertisements for her around town. I guess basically it's just like this sort of software thing you can buy to have this like fake girlfriend who sort of customizes herself to sort of be the perfect girl you'd want. It's a very sort of dark commentary on what technology might evolve into. But I really liked their relationship, and there's a lot of sort of interesting questions that come from it. I'll talk more about that when I sort of go to the last third, though. But I really liked all their scenes together, especially this scene, which felt like it was a bit of an evolution of concepts from the Spike Jonze movie Her. And it's a scene where she gets this prostitute to come in, and she projects her holographic self over the other girl's body, and then she has sex with Kay. So it's like sort of a three-way, I guess. But it was a very unique concept for a scene, I really liked the way it was done, the music and everything. It was very emotional. And, again, it kind of reminded me of Her, which is a really great movie. So that was nice to see. So all of this detective stuff goes on for the first two-thirds. It's building up nicely. It's very suspenseful. We understand the characters. We know who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. We know he's on a quest to find Deckard. And he meets Deckard and sort of gets some answers. And I mentioned this before. What I really like is that they never really directly say if Deckard was a replicant or not. Like, there is evidence sort of for and against it. And, you could point to certain elements and say, well, okay, he aged and didn't die, so he didn't have a 4-year lifespan, but then maybe he was a special model. But then they never really say if this child of Rachel's is like replicant or a human replicant hybrid. So I liked that they had enough to support both sides. And this is probably because, Harrison Ford hates the idea of Deckard being a replicant, but Ridley Scott loves it. So I guess their compromise was just, well, there's still no clear answer. No one figures it out. Which was nice. So this all goes down, and then the bad guys, Neander Wallace, who's sort of the main corporation head macho guy, he's the new Tyrell, and his main personal death squad robot assistant, replicant assistant, Love, that's her name. They track them down and capture Deckard, take him away, and then Kay is taken in by this like resistance movement, because it turns out that prostitute he was with earlier, she was a member of it, and she planted a tracker on him. So they capture him. And then this is the part where I'm a little conflicted. This is sort of where that comes in. And it's basically everything from here on afterwards. So it's revealed that there is this sort of underground cult of replicants. They're led by this leader who has taken her eye out, because that's the way they identify replicants now, is they just have a simple like serial number imprinted on the eye. And then it turns out that Kay, he's not the son of Deckard and Rachel. It's a girl, so it's not him. And they're waiting sort of for a chance to like build up their forces and use this child sort of as like a messiah figure, I guess, to help spur the revolution against their creators. And the main thematic line that is echoed here is that like the most human thing you can do is die for a cause. And just the whole concept of this, I felt, didn't really sort of sit well with me. It felt very out of place. I think also because there was a really great anime short film made for Blade Runner 2049. It took place in 2022. It was called Blackout. And this basically details how these replicants detonate a nuclear device over Los Angeles, thus causing a giant EMP to wipe out all of the electronic records of which replicants are on file and stuff, so it's a lot harder to hunt them down. It's not really discussed in the movie. You sort of just get a passing mention of the blackout, but that's what it is. So if you happen to have seen the movie and not watched the little shorts, I recommend them. The first two are live action and are decent. They introduce the characters of Wallace and Morton, but the third anime one is really great. It's like Animatrix, but with Blade Runner, so the whole influence has come full circle. But so I already felt there had been this like resistance movement, so It just seemed that there was this other resistance, that they're gonna rise up and do the same thing, or inspire replicants to reproduce, if for some reason they haven't already before. So that, to me, that's more evidence that Deckard would be human, um, because it's a human replicant hybrid, which makes it special, which maybe had never happened before. I'm not sure exactly. And then just the sort of theme that they're echoing, to the most human thing you can do is die for a cause. Like, that seems like a little more propaganda-ish, almost. Like, you could apply that to, like, any deadly movement in human history, and maybe for them it was the right thing, the good cause, but for others it definitely wasn't. So how do you determine what a good cause is? I mean, clearly in this case we can see that, okay, well, these replicants are being abused and discriminated against. But it seemed like kind of an ultimatum. It's like, oh, you have to join the cause and give up your individuality. So I didn't like that. But one thing that I didn't really sort of get after I'd watched the film, and I didn't really figure this until later, was the next scene. We have Kay. He sees this giant hologram of Joy, and it's an advertisement because she is a product, and this sort of makes him question, right, how much did his Joy actually care about him? Right? Was it all just simply a computer calculating the most appropriate response to form a bond? How much of it was real? How much of it was fake? So, it's a very sort of depressing thing to think about, but I really liked that element to it, that he was sort of questioning that, reality aspect to their relationship. But it's definitely very sad to look at in perspective, because I did like their connection, but was it just so good because a computer has been engineered to calculate the most appropriate response? So, that was a very good sort of philosophical type theme in there. And so originally I kind of thought that he was basically going along with what the Resistance had said, but sort of actually thinking about it more, he wasn't, because the Resistance, I believe they wanted Deckard dead so that he didn't spill any secrets, or that, I don't know, he couldn't be harvested for information or something like that. As Wallace says, he's the key, I have the lock. So that was what they were wanting to do, was, okay, die for the cause, kill Deckard no matter what it takes. But I feel that, in a way, what we're supposed to get from this is a rejection of that, and a focus on individuality, because Kay doesn't do that. He goes after Deckard, but it's to save him, so he can reunite Deckard with his daughter, who it turns out is the memory implanter from earlier, whose name escapes me, but she had a nice accent, wherever it was from. So, once I had thought about that, that made me, appreciate it a little more. Originally, for some reason, I just sort of had in my mind that, what was the main theme? Well, the one line that stuck out was, the most human thing you can do is die for a cause, and it's like, that's not really that great of a theme. There's not much to expand upon there, right? Where's the philosophy? So, I liked that I sort of figured that out, but then it's still not perfect for me, because we do get a really great battle sequence where Kay and Love, they're fighting. Their hover car crashes sort of right on the edge of this dam that's like a giant wall blocking off the ocean from Los Angeles. And it's like, it looks dark. That's what I really love about the look of this scene. It looks like it's nighttime, and there's barely any light to it. It feels really realistic, but still got a great style to it. So they have a fight. Kay kills Love, he defeats her, and he frees Deckard, and they escape from the drowning car. Um, and then that scene is over with, and then he takes Deckard to meet his daughter. Kay lies down outside. I presume he dies. It seems to sort of be framed that way. But again, this is sort of a result of expectations. But when a sequel is playing it so close to the original, it is important to compare, as I think I've said in a few other of my reviews. And I was really hoping that there'd be a bit more, like, I don't know, I guess, philosophical discussion. Like, you think to the ending of the original Blade Runner, right? There's a great chase scene, this sort of standoff between Roy and Deckard. But then at the end, he all of a sudden decides not to kill Deckard. He gives that really great Tears in the Rain speech, which is just so iconic. And then dies. And, that really gets you thinking that in the end, maybe this replicant was more human than human. He seemed, in a way, that makes me feel like he's the main character of the story in his quest to find the creator to achieve immortality. But then killing the creator when the creator is not what is expected. And then sort of, using the idea of memory and impressions as a way of achieving immortality. I always feel that he saved Deckard because he wanted someone to remember him and have a lasting impact in that way. So, that's such a really great, powerful scene, but I didn't really feel there was, like, an equivalent to that in this. Not that there has to be, but, I would rather take a, not big action scene with some really great ideas and themes at the end than just a really large-scale, well-done action scene that's entertaining, if that makes sense. So, again, I think I have a little more appreciation for the third act now that I've sort of thematically got it figured out, and I'm sort of looking at it on its own, but I do think overall I'd probably have to watch the movie again and know what's coming and expecting it. Other thing I can say about the third bit is that I didn't really like how this resistance element sort of felt like a bit of a sequel bait spin-off type aspect. Like, I don't know if they're going to do anything with that. There were a lot of loose ends at the end of the original Blade Runner before, and until this movie, no one complained about them. But to me, I just have a bit of a feeling that maybe that was thrown in there to, leave room open for more sequels. But, thankfully, other than that, which, again, it might not even occur, this wasn't like some kind of setting up a franchise type film. So, I appreciate it for that. This is like a film, beginning, middle, and end. And it's not like there was studio meddling to, include this to lead into this movie, because then the next summer we have this, and then after that. So, I liked that. That's really important. And I don't want to make it seem like this is like too negative a review, but I feel it is important to go into detail about what I didn't like. It's a lot easier to discuss negative elements and point out what we don't like than it is to explain why we like something. I mean, I can say the positives, right? I liked Kay a lot. Ryan Gosling did a great job. I loved his relationship with Joy. It was very emotional, and I was actually very sad when this Joy died, regardless of whether or not she's just a program computing correct answers. I was like hoping for more of her, in a way, and we sort of got that with the advertisement scene later, but like her, actually. I thought Harrison Ford did a good job. I don't really think he phoned it in, and some people might feel that way, but I liked what he did. Although this does raise an unfortunate trend of the fact that it just seems that Harrison, he does his awesome 80s movies, they get rebooted or sequels added years later, and it's always about that he has some kind of estranged kid. He's always been a bad father. He can't avoid that. In Indiana Jones, his son was like a greaser, and in Star Wars, his son was like trying to be a Sith Lord and rule the galaxy. And now in this one, his daughter is like some replicant messiah that he hasn't seen in years because he's off hiding in Vegas in a really sweet casino. So it's just some kind of trend, I guess, that's going on. You know, I'm actually surprised I didn't predict it going that way. Trying to think what else. One other thing, I guess I wasn't too fully sold on with the way it was the outcome was the character of Neander Wallace. Like, every scene he was in was really great. I especially love his confrontation with Deckard, where he's trying to sort of get in his head by subtly suggesting that maybe him impregnating Rachel was all planned from the beginning. Although I did get very scared when that line was playing out, because I was worried that this film was basically going to say everything that happened in the first Blade Runner was organized and planned out perfectly. I thought, no, please do not go that direction. But thankfully, it's clear that that's just him sort of messing with him, and it's more of the whole is he or is he not a replicant type sort of distractions. But then there's a lot of interesting callbacks to Rachel's character, because he has this replicant that looks like her just show up and talk to him. And it looked really convincing that that was Sean Young. One thing that they did very clever was she only has like 2 lines, and one of them it's from the back of her head, so you only see the mouth for one line, because I feel that when it comes to this type of facial reconstruction, actor younger recreation, that the mouth is really the hard thing to do properly without it being too uncanny valley. And so I think that was smart to mainly film from the back of her head. And then he has a great line afterwards about, oh, her eyes were green. So that's a cool bit. But the only thing for me is that I think that's like the last scene that Wallace is in the movie. Right? Like, there was no real resolution in that way. I guess that could have been also why I was a little sort of let down, because I was expecting that, like, something with Wallace would be like the big final confrontation of like ideologies or something like that. But it wasn't. It just sort of ends, and he's probably off still making more slave replicants and something. So, it's okay to have an ambiguous ending, and I'd like to think that this isn't going to, like, try to start some kind of big trilogy or something, but we never know. Other than that, I don't really have too much else to say. It's mainly that I have to sort of talk and discuss this last third and the way it might impact the way I view the other 2/3 when I rewatch it. But again, like, not trying to sound negative here, the first 2/3 are really, really perfect. Like, it was so cool seeing this cinematography and this world again, and seeing so many different elements of it. Like, that was like the main thing that I wanted, and that we got to see. And I had thought from watching the trailers that Kay might be a replicant, and I was really hoping that, oh, that's not going to be like the big twist or something, because I'm going to see that a mile away. And it isn't. They say it right at the beginning of the movie, and then it rolls from there. And so it's definitely a lot different than, instead of figuring out who a character's identity is in that way. We just know it from the bat, and that allows us to look at them from a certain perspective. And the thing I like, and this was sort of something I've been thinking about, and it's probably why I'm slowly appreciating the movie a little more, is how this film is a representation of like a journey to understanding humanity, right? I've seen a few comments on other reviews discussing this, and I'm really glad that I read these because I think that sort of helped me out a little more. So, at the beginning, Kay, he's ridiculed for being a replicant. He's definitely an outcast. He still does his job, but probably feels weird about it. A replicant killing other replicants because they're a different rebellious model. And then throughout that, he gets this hope that he might be bigger than what he actually is. Going across this journey to find his true identity, these memories, and all these things like that. Joy's constantly telling him that he's special, he's unique. There's pages from his life missing. And all of a sudden, that sort of flipped upside down, turned it on its head, when it turns out he's not some kind of chosen one or special one. It's somebody else. He just happens to be more of the distraction. He's the red herring. Like, he was given these memory implants and everything to make it look to anyone else observing that he would be the special child, when he's not. So, and this deception was so good it even fooled him. So, at the end, he's sort of confronted by this. What does he do? But he chooses to embrace his humanity and does what he feels is right, not for a cause or some kind of personal gain, just the right thing. He wants to save Deckard from whatever horrors are going to occur to him on an off-world colony and reunite the family. And then at the end, he dies as a real boy, Pinocchio. So once I've sort of formulated that and put it all together, I think in perspective, it's actually a lot better. So I think by me rambling and whispering and talking about this movie, I've sort of managed to somehow improve my own view of it. It's pretty impressive. I don't do that very often. You should be quite privileged to have witnessed a miracle. If you've seen the movie, you get that reference, but that's fine. Anyway, I think that is all I have to say. I really enjoyed this movie. It is not as perfect as I think it could have been. No, it's not as good as the original, but it was never going to be. I'm really glad that this film was made by capable hands and the proper team doing it. I look forward to hopefully seeing if my opinion gets better if I watch it again, now that I've formulated all these thoughts. And yeah, there's one more thing though. The reason that out of all of these movies, that Alien and Blade Runner are the best, and why Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and Blade Runner 2049 will never be as good, there is a severe lack of purge. Alien got it right with purge. Blade Runner understood this and kept the purge. But there has been a severe lack of purge in Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and Blade Runner 2049. And that is just unacceptable. But there's not much we can do about that, unfortunately. I guess this means we're going to have to make a whole other film just to simply justify adding more purge. And that's all I have to say.